Welcome to The Beat. I'm Antonia Hilton in tonight for Ari Melber. We start with multiple breaking news developments on Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Late today, Donald Trump filing a libel suit against the Wall Street Journal over its new Epstein reporting. Also late today, Trump's DOJ filing a motion to unseal grand jury testimony about Epstein. Trump's new suit names Rupert Murdoch, the Journal's parent company, and the two reporters who broke that story. The Journal detailing a 2003 letter that Trump reportedly wrote to Epstein for his 50th birthday. The Journal describes the letter as, quote, body. It contains several lines of typewritten text framed by the outline of a naked woman, which appears to be hand-drawn with a heavy marker. In the message, Trump reportedly imagines a conversation with Epstein. Quote, Donald, we have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, yes, we do, come to think of it. Donald, enigmas never age. Have you noticed that? And it ends with the line, Donald, a pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret. Trump denies the story. Quote, this is not me. This is a fake thing. It's a fake Wall Street Journal story. I never wrote a picture in my life. I don't draw pictures of women. As for Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi, late today, she filed a motion to unseal grand jury transcripts. But the process could take weeks. And as the Post reports, even if released, the material would constitute only a fraction of the evidence and investigative material that the FBI amassed during its years-long investigation. Critics pointing out, it looks like Trump is trying to stall and dodge rather than actually reveal critical information. Greg Sargent in the New Republic writing, quote, Trump's only way out of this is to seek full release of the Epstein files. But he won't, and he can't explain why he won't. The more he calls for meaningless releases that don't provide real transparency, the more he will stoke conspiracism, and the more he'll appear in on the elite cover-up. Trump today getting hit with more questions.
Mr. President, why not go further than just unsealing this?
Mr. President, did you send that letter? Release the full files?
Christy Greenberg, MSNBC legal analyst and former deputy chief of criminal division for the Southern District of New York, and Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal correspondent, join us tonight here at the table. Thank you both for being here. Christy, I want to start with you and this lawsuit. Trump going after Rupert Murdoch, the reporters behind this story, filed in Florida in the district where a judge named Eileen Cannon just so happens to be. I'm curious what you think is going on here and if he really has a shot at being successful in going after this story.
Well, if he's before Judge Cannon, he's got a shot. But putting that aside, I mean, look, the Wall Street Journal knew this was going to happen. There had been communications days before this story broke where he was threatening to sue. So this can't be a surprise to anybody that he managed to follow through with it. Whether or not he has a leg to stand on, I think they wouldn't have published this story if they didn't feel very confident. And, you know, he has to show that they knew that this was false, that this was going to be defamatory. I believe it's a libel lawsuit. And you know, they must feel like they are on very solid footing as to where they got this letter, what their sourcing was, and that they reported it accurately. So given all of that, I think he's unlikely to succeed unless he happens to get a good draw with good old Judge Cannon.
Lisa, is there any chance here that a lawsuit could actually backfire on Trump in this case?
It could. And the way that it would backfire on him, Antonia, is through the discovery process. Because as you know, if a case were to survive a motion to dismiss, then the parties begin to exchange information that helps them prove either their claims or their defenses. As the plaintiff in this lawsuit, Donald Trump would have to sit for a deposition. And as an observer of prior Trump litigation, including both of the E. Jean Carroll trials,
Right.
I can tell you that where Donald Trump has an opportunity to defend himself, he is always his worst enemy. He literally buried himself in the E. Jean Carroll trial through his deposition there. That's where he mistook a picture of E. Jean for his then wife, Marla Maples. It's also where he doubled down on the Access Hollywood tape and said that he considered himself a star. In other words, yes, when he said that stars could do certain things. He was
meant it.
absolutely talking about himself and describing his own modus operandi. Those were things that juries, two juries of his New York peers, held against him in the E. Jean Carroll case. If his defamation case were to go that far, Donald Trump would have to sit for a deposition, exchange materials. But of course, Donald Trump is counting, Antonia, on it never going that far. Because in the two lawsuits that he's filed to date against other media organizations, he has extracted settlements from them well before those things could ever happen.
So you think his hope here is basically that the Wall Street Journal's parent company is like, we want this to go away and we'll pay for it to get out of our face?
Yes, I mean, I think the Wall Street Journal's parent companies will first try what I suggested, which is to move to dismiss on legal grounds, to say that whatever Donald Trump's complaint says against them doesn't even meet the legal framework for a defamation claim. Now, we haven't seen that complaint yet. It hasn't been filed. If your viewers or you have noticed me like typing away at my computer, it's because I'm trying to find that complaint as soon as it's publicly available. All we know is that a docket has been created, meaning a case has been created online, that he has sued 5 entities or individuals, and that the case is described online as being a defamation case. Beyond that, we don't even know who represents Donald Trump right now. On the docket, he's described as pro se, which is the legal term for someone who represents themselves. Clearly, Donald Trump is not representing himself in this case. So there's a lot we still have to learn about Donald Trump's defamation case against the Wall Street Journal, its reporters, and Rupert Murdoch. But by naming Murdoch himself as a defendant, I think that's sign number one that he's hoping for a settlement.
So a lot still to come there. But then, Christy, on this effort to unseal the grand jury testimony going through your former workplace, can you break that down for us? And how likely is it that those documents, all that testimony, will actually see the light of day?
It's unlikely that those grand jury transcripts will see the light of day. The reason why is grand jury proceedings are in secret. Those are the rules. You have to have a reason to be able to say why it shouldn't be secret. Some kind of law enforcement reason, an ongoing case. You're helping other kinds of law enforcement agencies, right? Here, the interest is public is interested, and the public could be interested in a lot of different cases. That's not alone enough to get a judge to unseal grand jury transcripts. So I don't think they will succeed here. Where they may succeed is getting some of the information that had already come out at trial, information that's already been public in other areas, or if certain people whose testimony is in those transcripts, if they would agree and not put up a fight to it. But I mean, the other thing to take a step back, even if any of this were to be public, this is grand jury testimony where the prosecutors went in and said, here's our evidence against Epstein, here's our evidence against Maxwell. Not against Donald Trump. I would be shocked if you saw Donald Trump's name anywhere in these transcripts.
Right.
Remember, A.G. Barr was the attorney general at that point. Even listing Donald Trump as individual one in that indictment was a huge battle. There's no way he's getting dragged into Epstein and Maxwell grand jury presentations. So he's not a part of this, and he knows that. So even if he were to lose with the judge and this gets unsealed, he's fine. It's not implicating him. And it's not really, I think, going to implicate anybody else, because that wasn't the point of those presentations. There weren't other targets there that they were looking to indict. So the base's interest in a client list and finding out all these other people who they believe may be culpable, that's not what you would see in this transcript. So this is a red herring. This is a way for him to distract from the evidence people are actually interested in, which are the notes from interviews of these various witnesses that they looked at in this investigation. And that he doesn't need a court order to turn over. He could turn that over on his own. The fact that they haven't, that's the question people should be asking.
Lisa, do you see this as a red herring, as a distraction? I mean, do you think people will be able to understand all of what she's just laid out here, that this is just a fraction of what's out there, and that there's other information the federal government has that it sounds like we still will not see?
Mm-hmm.
Are people, given the way this story has gone and this fire has just continued to spread, do you think people are going to be on to what she's just laid out there?
Well, I think our viewers will, but the larger populace that is calling for the release of these files, I'm not sure that they will, because they'll see this as a sign that Donald Trump is trying to be more transparent and trying to let the information be freed. But for this terrible federal judge, there's a judge in the Southern District who oversaw the Epstein case, who I know, as we sit here tonight, is maybe days away from being demonized by this White House as just another radical liberal, Donald Trump hating judge who didn't want to let the administration educate the public about the Epstein files. It plays, Antonia, right into their narrative about judges and the press, as well as into Donald Trump's efforts to protect himself and inoculate himself from the growth of this story.
So I have to ask you both quickly. Senator Dick Durbin published a letter today. He said his office was told that FBI agents were instructed to flag any records in which President Trump was mentioned. Is that normal? What does that signal to the two of you?
Signals he's running the show, right? Like in the past, pre-Donald Trump, you had an attorney general who was independent and who ran investigations because they were in the best interest of the public and the people. Here, if you're looking for any mention of Donald Trump, why is that? It's clearly to protect Donald Trump, to protect his interests, not because the public may have an interest in knowing that information. And so there has been a lot of questions about this decision, this 180, where, you go from February, where there's a press conference and we're the most transparent administration in history. You go from that to now you're not getting anything. What is the reason for that? How was the decision made? We got a 2-page memo that said a whole lot of nothing. And nobody is really being clear. It was an unsigned memo. We don't know who made these decisions. And this says to me, Donald Trump is the one directing the show.
Mm-hmm. Christy Greenberg, Lisa Rubin, thank you both so much. Always great to be with you. Coming up in just 90 seconds, we'll talk to the dean of the Columbia Journalism School, Jelani Cobb, about the new Trump lawsuit and his war against the free press. Trump's allies in Congress now also gutting NPR and PBS in a vote taken in the dead of night. NPR's Steve Inskeep is here on that and what public radio will do next for listeners like you. And finally, the shocking end to Stephen Colbert on Late Night. Was it due to political pressure? We tracked down tape from the show premiere to find his very first joke about Donald Trump.
Later, after that, I'll talk to presidential candidate Jeb Bush. Yeah. As many of you know, of course, Governor Bush was the governor of Florida for 8 years, and you would think that much exposure to oranges and crazy people would have prepared him for Donald Trump. Evidently not.
And we're back with breaking news on Trump and Epstein. Late today, Trump filing a libel lawsuit over the Wall Street Journal's bombshell reporting about his relationship with Epstein. This is just the latest media organization he's attacked in the courts for reporting stories that he doesn't like. Also late today, Trump's attorney general filing a motion seeking the release of grand jury testimony. For Trump politically, the big question is whether any of this will subdue the MAGA rebellion that's been going on for nearly 2 weeks now.
How many of you are not satisfied with the results of the investigation?
Epstein is a key that picks the lock on so many things.
Who went to Epstein Islands? Who specifically went on the plane? Who stayed for more than a night?
We're getting flooded with thousands, hundreds of thousands of comments that are very unhappy about this.
This is the ultimate betrayal, Carl.
There's been a lot of discussion about the Epstein files and the president's comments yesterday calling it a hoax. Can you clarify which part of the Epstein hoax is the hoax?
I will not rest until we go full Jan 6 committee on the Jeffrey Epstein files.
I think the time has come for the administration to release all of the files.
And joining me now is Jelani Cobb, Dean of the Columbia Journalism School, staff writer with The New Yorker magazine, and MSNBC political contributor. Jelani, great to have you here. So at a time when this administration seems to be hell-bent on going after news organizations, critics, journalists, how do you see this Wall Street Journal development fitting into the bigger picture?
Well, I mean, it's a winning strategy, or has been a winning strategy for them. Having filed a lawsuit against 60 Minutes or against 60 Minutes parent company, and then resulting in a lucrative settlement there. There's the ABC George Stephanopoulos situation, and in each instance, these cases have been thought of in legal circles as fairly flimsy. But that's not the metric that you should be using to understand them, because politically they've been super inflammatory. And they've also been aided by the fact that these parent companies had their own interests, be they mergers or other kinds of concerns. I would also add, when we saw the Washington Post back away from endorsing Kamala Harris, also the greater interests of Jeff Bezos' other enterprises factor into that as well. So the question is, not so much whether or not this has legal merit, but are there other considerations, other dynamics that provide leverage against the Wall Street Journal as this gets adjudicated?
There's one little detail in this story that caught my eye last night as the president was processing this report and reacting to it in real time online, that he mentioned that he asked Rupert Murdoch to make this story go away. And we haven't really seen a lot of people dig into that. Of course, there's so much to this entire story that just keeps going that I can understand why reporters haven't spent a ton of time talking about that. But he basically said, I went after one of the corporate owners and specifically asked them to kill a story. And I'm curious what that little detail tells you about the moment that we're in.
Well, I mean, one, it talks about the coziness and chumminess of these relationships, not to mention that it completely obliterates any kind of executive branch respect for the First Amendment. That's all kinds of red lines that you're stepping over there. And then finally, it's really telling that the story wasn't killed, that the story still found its way to print. And I'd be curious about what those conversations were like.
Do you think in this moment, though, that reporters in newsrooms from the Washington Post to Wall Street Journal here, can we trust our corporate owners to have our backs,
well, I mean,
given what you're seeing?
You're in this conversation as much as I am, but I will tell you straight up, the conversations I have with people do not trust. They're very skeptical and very concerned about the extent to which their various parent companies will have their back, especially if they're doing controversial reporting, if they're doing something that involves government accountability, anything that could generate a scandal or potential legal investigation. People have real concerns about that.
You're a journalist, but you're also a teacher of journalists, a mentor to other journalists. What are you telling the young people that you work with right now about how our field is going to survive all of this? And do you think we're going to make it through the next 3.5 or so years?
Well, I mean, I think that it's useful to have a gauge for history here. We have gone back a lot to the nature of the repression and antagonism that was directed at media and news organizations during the McCarthy era. That's been a very frequent, probably the closest analogy to what we see now. And I believe we will make it through the next 3.5 years. My investment in journalism is contingent upon that faith. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be doing what I do. But I also think that it will be difficult. I think we shouldn't underestimate the dynamics that we're up against. Joseph McCarthy was a senator. We're now dealing with antagonism that comes directly from the White House.
And as you see this, a lot of people, they ask us as reporters when we're out in the field a lot, like if it's hyperbolic to make comparisons to McCarthy, if we're going to be able to very clearly know the moment at which we are in that moment. Do you feel comfortable saying we absolutely are? And then what are your warnings or your advice to those of us in the fight in the moment, if that is really what this is?
Well, I will quote the historian Ellen Schrecker, who was one of the foremost authorities on McCarthyism in the United States. And she would agree with the idea that it is a hyperbolic comparison, and that she thinks that the current situation is worse than what we were seeing in terms of incursions into First Amendment rights during the McCarthy era. So yes, I think that we absolutely should make those kinds of comparisons.
Thank you, Jelani. Great to be with you as always. Coming up, Will Sommer is here on the links between the Epstein conspiracy theories and QAnon and why this story is haunting Trump. Also, how Trump's new lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal is connected to his wider attacks on the free press, like his push to defund NPR and PBS, and new concerns that Stephen Colbert may have been canceled for his political takes.
And the idea that he's like, why are we still talking about that? Anyway, about the 2020 election. That was stolen, All right.
And we are back with Trump facing an uproar over Jeffrey Epstein, while his attorney general just filed a motion to unseal grand jury testimony. The problem for Trump: it's unclear what could ever satisfy his enraged followers. Experts pointing out MAGA's Epstein conspiracy theories run very deep and are linked to QAnon conspiracy theories about a deep state cabal, fabrications that took hold on the far right, in part because Trump and his allies embraced them, like Kash Patel, now Trump's FBI director. Here's what Patel said about QAnon before Trump's second term.
A lot of people bring up Q and a lot of these other theories, and I'm like, look, there's a lot of good to a lot of it. And if it's Q or whatever movement that's getting that information out, I am all for it every day of the week. With anything, Q or otherwise, is you can't ignore that group of people that has such a strong, dominant following. I talk with the president all the time as well, and we're just blown away at the amount of acumen some of these people have.
And joining me now is Will Sommer, senior reporter for The Bulwark. He's also the author of Trust the Plan: The Rise of QAnon and the Conspiracy That Unhinged America. Thank you for being here, Will. You're an expert on all of this. So bring me into the roots here, QAnon's roots and its connection to the kind of firestorm, fallout we've experienced these last 2 weeks.
Sure. So at the heart of QAnon and sort of related conspiracy theories is the belief that there's a pedophile cabal that rules the world. And it's a lot of people in the Democratic Party and Hollywood and banking. And that Donald Trump comes in because they think he's going to defeat the cabal and usher in a sort of utopian age. And Jeffrey Epstein's case, because there was a lot of legitimate stuff behind it and evidence, a lot of that was funneled into QAnon. And so it's really a huge pillar of QAnon. And so when the president or his team really fed into QAnon, they were getting people really excited about some sort of justice in the Epstein case.
I'm curious, though, as you see parts of his base revolt. I mean, we've seen people call into right-wing shows and say that they feel deceived and bamboozled in recent days. To an extent, do you think that the president has overestimated the extent to which this movement has been just about him or owned entirely by him?
I think he has. This is a strange situation because it's maybe the first time I can think of where Trump is this out of step with the base for this long. I mean, this is an issue. I mean, people called it an article of faith. I mean, for many people, it is a religious issue. They think they're working on behalf of God when they spread QAnon. I mean, they think, understandably, they're very emotionally affected by the stories of Jeffrey Epstein and his associates. And so this isn't like, bombing Iran or raising tariffs or whatever, something that the base might disagree with on. I mean, this is really like a core part of a lot of these people's identities.
And as you just touched on there, in a way, it's not a hoax at all, although the president has used that word a lot in recent days, because someone's serving 20 years in prison in connection to all of this. And the harm that he's caused to untold numbers of victims is very, very real. So I'm curious, as he now makes this effort to get the grand jury testimony here in the Southern District of New York unsealed, made public. It seems to be an effort to placate some of his base. Do you think that is even going to work at this point? Will people be satisfied by what we may or may not, because it will ultimately be up to a judge? Would they be satisfied if we do get our hands on all of this?
I mean, I think Trump's base is dealing with a huge backlash or whiplash here. I mean, they thought this was going to be a list of all these Democrats and celebrities they didn't like politically. And now suddenly the question is, what's up with Trump's ties to Epstein? Why is Trump trying to move so quickly to cover this up or close the case? I think we know the grand jury stuff is just a tiny sliver of the total evidence that could be potentially released. It seems like the administration is trying to say, okay, we'll give you the grand jury stuff and then it's over. I think this is going to kind of stick in Trump supporters' craws and even people who don't support Trump. I think there are a lot of independents who are brought into this case and interested in it because of podcasts, things like that. And they're interested in seeing how it's resolved as well.
I'm curious how you think they kind of psychologically deal with the cognitive dissonance right now of being so firmly certain there is a cover-up, a cabal, a deep state that has been around for a long time, but also certain that their guy is not in it.
Well, they've had a lot of practice, right? On one hand, we've had video of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein kind of palling around, checking out
Right.
women in the past, and Trump obviously gave a quote about Epstein's love of young women. And in the past, they had, particularly in QAnon, they had decided, well, this means that Trump was infiltrating the cabal, or he was like going James Bond mode. And now I think they're facing a new challenge. I mean, certainly Trump is offering them an excuse and saying, Obama or Comey cooked up this letter I supposedly wrote to Epstein.
What a fantasy to imagine that Trump spent many years being friends with Epstein just for this long game to execute what this perfect game we're seeing unfold right now. Will Sommer, thank you so much for joining tonight. Coming up, Trump and evangelicals. Will this Epstein saga jeopardize their support for Donald Trump? But first, CBS cancels Stephen Colbert's show just days after he criticized Donald Trump and his own parent company. Critics blasting the decision as potentially political.
Folks, I want you to know I could not ask for a better TV family than the good folks at CBS right here. They have been nice. They're lovely people. I'm happy to say the CEO of CBS, Les Moonves, is right there in the front row to cheer me on. Les, thank you so much for being here.
Stephen Colbert in his very first monologue as the late night host, thanking the company that would go on to cancel him. Colbert announcing yesterday that CBS and its parent company, Paramount, are pulling the plug on the iconic and well-rated show. It is the most watched late night show, by the way, with more than 2.4 million viewers.
Next year will be our last season. The network will be ending The Late Show in May. And yeah, I share your feelings.
This just days after Colbert slammed the network's $16 million settlement with the Trump administration.
My parent corporation, Paramount, paid Donald Trump a $16 million settlement over his 60 Minutes lawsuit. Now, I believe this kind of complicated financial settlement with a sitting government official has a technical name in legal circles. It's big fat bribe.
CBS executives are saying the cancellation was, quote, purely a financial decision and, quote, is not related in any way to the show's performance, content, or other matters happening at Paramount. But many are skeptical about the timing. Senators Elizabeth Warren and Adam Schiff both pressing for answers on whether the show was canceled for political reasons. These are difficult days for media across the dial. The GOP-led House just approved over $1 billion in cuts to government funding for public media like PBS and NPR. So joining me now is Steve Inskeep, host of NPR's Morning Edition and Up First podcast and author of Differ We Must, How Lincoln Succeeded in a Divided America. Steve, I've been listening to you for a very long time. It's an honor to have you on the show and to be in conversation with you.
Wow, thank you.
Well, let's begin with just your initial reaction to Colbert's announcement. And if I could get your thoughts as a reporter about the kinds of questions and the timing, I guess, around this announcement. What questions all this may have raised for you?
Yeah, first, thank you for asking me to answer as a reporter. I should be guided by what I know. And of course, I don't know precisely what the motivations were inside the corporate offices for this decision. But of course, you have questions. One of them you already raised astutely, the timing. I also drilled in on that line as you read the statement that this was purely a financial decision. What does that mean, that it's purely a financial decision? Is that about the long-term decline of the profitability of late-night television and of linear television generally, which is a real thing, or is there some other way that it's a financial decision? But we should be honest that we need more reporting here, and we should be guided by the facts. I do want to say one thing, if I can, about Stephen Colbert. Really remarkable figure. Trump critic for sure, on and on for years, but also a very distinct individual, very clearly and openly a person of faith. In some ways comes across to me almost as a conservative figure, a very complicated and interesting figure. And it would be sad if there wasn't any place for Stephen Colbert in the landscape, although I expect he'll end up somewhere if he wants to after this show ends in a year.
No doubt that wherever he goes, many, many people will follow. And I know a lot of fans of the show, I'm one of them, they're heartbroken that they're not even thinking about a way in which the show is going to continue, and at least in its current form. You're, of course, at NPR, a place that is facing its own pressure from this administration right now through this rescission process, zeroed out federal funding. Can you tell us a bit about the conversations that are happening in your newsroom and the kinds of preparations reporters, newsroom leaders are making so they can continue to keep people informed in some of the more rural and remote corners of our country right now?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is for us just to continue to do the work, to do the job. I got up at 3 o'clock this morning and did a show. I'll be back next week. I have other colleagues working around the clock, and we're doing our jobs. And because you asked about rural areas, I want to say just a word about what NPR is. We're a network of stations all across the country. And I even brought a prop, if that's all right. I brought this tie here. This is a Purdue University tie from my home state of Indiana. And I bring it because on the campus of Purdue is the first place I ever walked into, was given a little tour of a public radio station. When I was a kid, I didn't really know what public radio was. I later worked in a public station in the coal mining region of eastern Kentucky. I worked in a public radio station in Newark, New Jersey, in the center of Newark, New Jersey. Radically different places, and public radio was there, all of those places. Now I anchor this national program, and we take in stories from across the country, and they're stories I think that are valuable and nobody else is covering. I was just thinking about recent stories, a story from Georgia about whether their Medicaid work requirements are working well. Turns out they're not working so well. Relevant information. A story from Texas after the giant flood, asking why Texas has not spent the money that it says it needs for flood control projects. Valuable work that can save lives. Des Moines, Iowa, a story about crops and planting them in a way that they take in more of the rainfall that increases all the time. A story out of Cincinnati about their sewer system. This is not hot and sexy stuff. It's not glamorous work, but it's good. And there are people
it's necessary.
at local. Yes, it's necessary. It's part of society. It's not a red and blue discussion necessarily. It's not about heat. It's about light. And my colleagues are doing that at public stations across America.
Are you starting to hear from your listeners? Do they know that this is happening, that this fight has played out in D.C. and that it could very well impact them and the basic information they have to make key decisions in their day-to-day lives?
Yes, I've received many supportive messages personally, and a lot of local public radio stations have begun already fundraising drives. They want to make sure that they can raise the money to replace this. Let's remember how public radio stations, the local stations, are primarily funded. Their largest source of income has never been the government in most cases. It's been ordinary listeners, and a lot of those people are calling in or writing in or going online and making extra contributions to try to make up the difference. For some stations, as you mentioned, in rural areas, it's going to be real hard because there aren't as many people, and so there's not as much money. And so they rely more on the federal subsidy than some of the big city stations. Those are the ones that are most urgently in danger, places like Alaska or rural Idaho or Wyoming, I suppose. I was in Cody, Wyoming, and learned about a series that they had done about clean coal in Wyoming. Stations like that maybe are a little bit more at risk than elsewhere, but the fight is on to keep this network on the air. And meanwhile, my job is just to do my job, to give you the best facts I can and be honest about what I know and also what I don't know, and the fact that I didn't get it all on today, so I'm going to try again tomorrow.
Well, Steve, I speak for many, many people when I say thank you for the work that you do, for waking up at 3 in the morning to keep so many of your fellow Americans informed. And I hope that some of these communities that have been so dependent on your voice and your colleagues' work, that they're able to still find you and to be in community with you, because I know it matters to them deeply. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll be back on the air Monday.
Up next, renewed scrutiny on Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein has Trump's own supporters raising doubts. The Jeffrey Epstein saga is reigniting some disturbing questions about Trump's history and views of women. Back in 2002, Trump told New York Magazine, quote, "I've known Jeff for 15 years. He's a terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do. And many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life." Trump also recently speaking in positive terms about Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted sex trafficker who procured underage girls for Epstein.
A reporter asked you about Ghislaine Maxwell. You said, quote, "I just wish her well, frankly." Mr. President, Ghislaine Maxwell has been arrested on allegations of child sex trafficking. Why would you wish such a person
First of all,
well?
I don't know that. Yeah, I wish her well. I'd wish you well. I'd wish a lot of people well. Good luck. Let them prove somebody was guilty. And I do wish her well. I'm not looking for anything bad for her. I'm not looking bad for anybody.
We should note no evidence has ever been made public that suggests Trump did anything illegal in terms of his relationship to the Epstein case. But Trump's past behavior towards women in general is also now under renewed scrutiny. Trump was found liable for sexual abuse in the E. Jean Carroll case, for example. He's made headlines for uncomfortable remarks about his daughter, Ivanka. And his first campaign was almost derailed by the infamous Access Hollywood tape.
You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the...
For years, evangelical conservatives have supported Trump in spite of all of this. So the question is, will the Epstein case be any different now? Joining me now to talk about all of this is Pastor Darrell Scott, a Pentecostal minister and longtime advisor to Donald Trump. Pastor, I want to begin this conversation, I guess, with a little level setting. This new Wall Street Journal report that Trump authored, allegedly, a bawdy, strange letter to Epstein for his birthday. He's denied the story, but in a way, it tells us something we sort of already knew. These two men hung out. They were friends. There are photos and videos. We've all seen them. So I have to ask you, as a Christian leader, how are you processing the fallout from all of this, but also squaring the president's associations with Epstein with your Christian faith?
Well, and first of all, thanks for having me on. And voting for a particular candidate, evangelical Christians tend to vote the platform, not necessarily the person, as the platform that this person is endorsing or advancing. Trump has been probably the most outspoken advocate for Christianity than any other president in my lifetime. And a lot of these things against him are simply allegations and accusations. I don't believe that hogwash letter. Trump doesn't even write letters like that. Trump doesn't email. Trump limits his conversation. He doesn't text. He doesn't email. I really can't see him writing a corny letter like that, a sweetheart corny letter to another man like that. I really just don't see it.
You don't believe the Wall Street Journal reporting at all, in spite the fact that we have years of video and photos of the two men hanging out. He is in flight logs. Jeffrey Epstein reportedly had numerous phone numbers for Trump.
Hanging out and being in the same room are two different dynamics. I know a lot of people that don't really know Trump that have pictures with him, and they've used those pictures to try to promote a relationship with him that they don't have. So there's a difference in being in a certain social setting and hanging out as buddies. You don't see Trump and Epstein going fishing together or doing things that buddies do. You just seen them in the same room.
He was at Mar-a-Lago. They were definitely doing things that buddies do.
There's a lot of people
that called him a friend.
People at Mar-a-Lago that don't know President Trump, that because they were with me, he shook their hand and took a picture with them, but he really didn't know him. Some he was meeting for the first time. He's in the hospitality business. He's been in the hospitality business for decades. That's what he is. Anybody that knows him knows he's a hospitable, gracious, engaging, gregarious guy. So for him to see
what is going on here in MAGA world? You know the players in this space. You're friends with, although I know you have some disagreements with people in this space as well. But they have demanded this. We're at this point in part because Trump, Vance, Bongino, Bondi, this administration made people believe there was more to the story and we'd get information. So what do we deserve at this point? What do you think the president owes people in terms of transparency and information around Epstein?
First of all, President Trump should not be held to a different standard than any other president. going back to the 250-year anniversary of this country. You can't hold Trump to a standard and say, now that Trump's president, we demand these papers to be released, but while Biden was president, we don't demand them.
But Biden wasn't talking about Epstein all the time.
Demand them from Biden because we were too busy. We had other things on our plate. Trump has had the most successful first 6 months of an administration than any president that you can think of. He's had all these significant, remarkable accomplishments. And now these people are talking about some Epstein letters that they cared nothing about 6 months ago.
They cared nothing about, but hey, okay, so Pastor, here's the thing though. Here's the thing though, Pastor, you yourself have engaged in this. I follow you. I followed you for a long time. We've known each other. I have read your tweets. A few months ago, you tweeted, release the Epstein Island guest list. You've made jokes going back years about Clinton and Epstein, Biden and Epstein. So you've been part of the movement that's pushed people to this point, right?
Yes and no, because listen, the guest list, all of that stuff was released. They did release the flight logs. They did, and there are a lot of people on, because you were on a flight log going to a particular place does not mean you participated in sex with underage kids. And so we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and make everybody guilty by association or osmosis simply because they took a plane with this guy who was a public figure that they might not necessarily have even known about his other life. There are people that I know that I grew up with that were friends that wound up doing some things that I said, I didn't know that person like that. That's not the person I know. Jeffrey Dahmer's neighbors didn't know that he was a cannibal. So we can't hold people guilty by association simply because they were in the same room with somebody.
But your own political allies right now are just asking the president, it seems, to follow through on a promise he made. We have to go to break, though, Pastor Scott. Thank you so much. I would love to have you back on with me because I have a feeling this story is not going away anytime soon.
We got to finish this, Antonia. Hey, listen, thanks for having me on. I consider you a friend. God bless you.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining. We'll be right back after this break. We now have the text of the lawsuit Trump filed against the Wall Street Journal. Trump accusing the reporters of defamation, claiming they acted with, quote, actual malice. He's seeking $10 billion in damages. We'll have more on that coming up. Keep it locked in right here on MSNBC.